Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Bill Cates, who's the founder of the Cates Academy for Relationship Marketing and the author of the new book, Radical Relevance. Bill, welcome to the program.
Hey, Mike, thank you. And just in case anyone misheard you, it's not Bill Gates, Bill Cates.
Yep.
Missed it by one letter and a few $1 billion.
And a few zeros.
And a few zeros. Yeah, exactly.
But, you do your part to make a difference in the world, and I know you have. I followed your work for years. I've got your book on referrals on my bookshelf, and I've got your new book, Radical Relevance, here in front of me that you had sent. And like I was mentioning just a second ago before we came on live is, I read this book in about 4 sittings, and I've got dog-eared pages and underlines and notes, so it is just really a great book. So what was it in your career point in the industry that made you think of this phrase and this need to talk about radical relevance?
Yeah, so essentially forever, 26, 27 years, I've been helping folks build their business through referrals, through introductions, being more referable, being proactive without being cheesy and pushy, getting connected. And this was kind of the next step in that a lot of folks, we know that the referral works because of borrowed trust. So it'll help us get our foot in the door. But we have to talk about what we do in a way that is super relevant and compelling to this prospect of ours. If not, then they'll dismiss us, even though we are coming with that borrowed trust. So I was actually with a mastermind group. We were brainstorming ideas, and I finally said, look, we just need to be relevant to our prospects, right? There's lots of ways to do that, but if we're not relevant, we'll be ignored. And so then, a guy said, well, the relevance revolution. And then somewhere along the line, I came up with radical relevance, and that stuck. Yeah. And so, so it's about how we communicate our value and lots of strategic and tactical things around that.
Yeah. And, I think when you say the word timely, when we think about the word timely, it's like, this time in business and in life is so needed in my opinion, for this reason. Life has gotten busier and busier, and I know that we've heard that for generations. And as you get busier, time flies. We get all that, but we have instant this and text that, and everything is like bop, 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 bop. And I've even heard reports where people have issues with grammar and writing in this generation because they're so used to the text communication. So with that thought in mind, we are vying and fighting for the attention of our target audience. And I know you do a lot of work with financial professionals, so do I. And so let's kind of guide this question to financial services and go, okay, you're vying for the attention of someone that may or may not need financial help at the moment with their retirement needs. They might think they're just fine. So you've got to be seen and heard with that relevance, meaning you've got to capture their attention. You've got to stand out. And maybe it's radical, meaning it's relevant, so, not to play with the word relevance, but it has to be relevant to where they are now. So talk a little bit about how you are vying for attention, given everything else that's going on in their life with text and email and busyness.
Right. Yeah. So the brain essentially is looking for relevance. The brain needs relevance, and this idea of relevance has been around forever. Yeah. From the first minute someone tried to persuade someone on something, the argument had to be relevant, right? And you're right, with the COVID and with all this other stuff that happened, it has become a little bit more important, and with just the flood of information. So if you're not relevant, you'll be ignored. Now, the fastest path to relevance, as I kind of mentioned, is that borrowed trust that comes with a referral and introduction from someone they already trust. So that's the first step into that. But then the message has to be relevant. And what I mean by radical relevance really is getting a clear target market. That's nothing new. But the mistake that so many people make, financial professionals, other professionals, is when they're crafting their message, when they're thinking what they're going to say to people on their website, their LinkedIn profile, they say, well, I don't want to leave this group out, and I don't want to leave this group out.
Yeah.
And so what happens is they, in their effort to cast a bigger net, their message gets watered down and becomes irrelevant to anybody, or certainly less compelling. And so just when we think we need to expand our net, we actually need to shrink it, tighten it. I'll give you a classic example for myself. When COVID hit, I didn't know what was going to happen, and the market crashes, and every advisor that I work with is just like, holding their clients' hands for a while. And so I'm thinking, all right, maybe I need to expand. Maybe I need to go after other types of professionals. And then I thought, that's totally against everything I teach.
Yeah.
What I need to do is double down and make a full-on commitment, is even a stronger commitment to my target market. So that's what I did, and it made a huge difference. And so the narrower our market, the better we know those people. And that brings in this concept of empathy. When it comes to sales and marketing, we have to display empathy, meaning appreciation for understanding of their situation. So the radical part is, how do we narrow to the point where we know our world so well, we know our prospects as well as we can going in, that when we talk about our value, they see themselves in our story. When we talk about what we do, who we do it for, how we do it, they see themselves in that. And they go, this person is talking to me. This person gets me. And that's what they want, right? They want it to be relevant in that regard and compelling. And so that's what I mean by that. So it's all about narrowing one's focus.
Yeah. And, I've done some reading or seen research recently in the world of marketing and innovations, and the word elegant. This is an elegant solution comes up. And what the research that I was seeing was explaining it this way. Well, sometimes the most elegant solution is the simplest one, the easiest, simplest path from A to B, because the more bells and whistles and turns and twists, it gets people confused. And I think that sets the stage for what you just said. And I literally, as you were talking there, I turned to the second dog-eared page in the book here and you say about the brain and relevance. The brain seeks clarity. The brain avoids danger, loves opportunity, seeks action, and craves clarity. And once you know that your prospects' brains are constantly scanning for relevant dangers and opportunities to hit the bullseye in the brain, you must craft messaging that makes the brain feel safe. That's marketing, that's influence. And so I think that relevance and that clarity and that the radicalness, I would submit to you, one aspect of that is, I'm being radical because I'm not being confusing. The radicalness is, is it that easy? Man, you really explain it well. And you don't need to get into statistical, stochastics and upset. Just tell me what I need to know about planning for retirement and keep it simple. And you do pull the levers in the background and accomplish this. So talk a little bit about that messaging, how to keep things clear in communicating to your clients and prospects.
Yeah, I mean, and I know that's part of your message, brevity plus clarity equals authority, right?
Yeah.
So, and clarity and brevity, although they sound similar, and I guess they could be, not necessarily exactly the same, right? You can be clear and not brief. And Donald Miller in his book, Creating Your Story Brand, says, confuse, you lose. And that's what happens. So, the brain wants to keep the organism alive, so the brain wants to actually conserve calories, just when maybe we're trying to expend calories. And so if something is a little confusing, a little unclear, it makes the brain work a little harder, and therefore the brain doesn't want to go there. Now, one can marshal the forces and figure out if your message is a little bit unclear, if they were introduced to you and you need this, then you'll work a little, but a lot of times you'll just lose people very quickly. I don't know. I can't figure it. I don't get it, right? There's a term in cognitive neuroscience, and yes, there is such a thing called cognitive neuroscience, that's called cognitive fluency. And what happens is if someone, let's say, goes to your website or reads an email or LinkedIn profile, or whatever, and they're not clear on what you're asking them to do and or what the next step is, if you haven't given them a clear call to action, do this next, then the brain just automatically assumes working with you is complicated.
Yeah.
It's unconscious. And so then you lose people because of that. So one of the things I always recommend to financial professionals is on the website and other ways to do this, have a very clear path. What is the path to working with you?
Yeah.
It could be, we'll have a strategy call, and then we'll learn more about you, discovery call, and then we'll make whatever it is. And I've seen some advisors do a great job of laying that out. And so that clarity of path of movement will pull people into it as opposed to blocking them off. How does one get clarity? Well, part of it's knowing what you do the best, what you're passionate about, what your clients need. In my book, the last chapter is this concept of blatant and critical problems. And so our clients, our prospects could have problems they don't realize they have, so they're hidden, they're not blatant. They could have aspirational problems. They may think life insurance. They may think a financial plan is aspirational. Yeah, I'll get to it eventually.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's our job to go in there and show them that what they think is aspirational is actually critical.
Yeah, you need to pull it from the future to how does it potentially impact you today. And the dotted line is, here's the outcome in the future.
Right. And when we can position our business to most of the time speak to blatant critical problems that people know they have, yes, I need that. Well, that's ideal. But it's not always that. So sometimes in our discovery, in our questioning, we have to ask a question or teach something that pulls it out so they see there really is an issue and the issue should be handled sooner than later. So if we're not moving our prospects into that quadrant of blatant critical problems, then there's a darn good chance they won't take the next step. We're not compelling them to move forward. Oh, yeah, I'll get to it when I get to it. They see it as aspirational. And so that's where we want to go. We want to pull people into that blatant critical, and they'll move heaven and earth to fix that kind of problem.
Reminds me of an old story, and you as a speaker, you can steal this or use it, or you've even maybe heard it before. But the old story goes that this old farmer walks up to his other buddy's farm and starts chatting with him on the porch, and his hound dog's laying there, and every so often he'll raise his head and howl like in pain, and he's like, man, 4 or 5 times of that, the guy goes, how come your dog is howling? He goes, oh, he's just laying on a nail. And he goes, well, how come he doesn't move? He goes, well, it just doesn't hurt him bad enough yet. Well, have you heard that one before?
No, but I mean, I get it. If it doesn't hurt enough, they'll endure the pain. Sometimes that's why they'll stay with the advisor they have, right?
Yes.
Part of our battle is the incumbent. And the devil they know is better than the devil they don't know, or they don't know how to let go of that person. They fear that conversation, and you haven't shown them that really they don't even have to have that conversation if they don't want to. There's another way to release that advisor. So, you have to show them the way, make it clear, make it easy.
And sometimes, as you were describing that, in the discovery calls, and I would even say this is kind of like the old, Glenn Ross, always be closing, but always be iterating. So always be listening for what your clients, when they first come on as a client, oh man, I really appreciate how you explained the whatever regarding my current financial situation or the future. Listen and even take notes or record and transcribe, but listen for these key moments so that gets placed into your overall messaging for the next time when you're talking to the next prospect. You're like, if you like a lot of my clients, you might feel that. And then you're using and always staying up to date. So that becomes being radically relevant, and relevant because it's like what I'm hearing right now, and radical because I actually listened to my current prospects to hear, and clients to hear what they are saying and feeling, right? So doesn't that have an aspect of always folding on top of the messaging to keep it fresh and keep it relevant?
Yeah, I mean, radical relevance is about having an incredible passion for really getting to know your prospects and clients, to not keep things on the surface. And like you say, always be listening, always be learning. I'd say also always be expanding the context. And what I mean by that, relevance is about context, right? The context of whoever we're speaking to. And so the more context we have about their world, then the more relevant we'll be, the more and the better we can help them. And so from the minute, even before you meet someone, if you're getting introduced and you learn from the referral source, you do some research on Google or whatever, their website, and then from the minute you meet them, you're still being curious, you're still listening, you're still saying, tell me more about that, because you know that the more context you gain, first of all, they're going to appreciate you and like you because you're interested, which is always good.
Yeah.
And it's got to be genuine. It can't just be this technique you're pulling on them.
Yep.
But then the more context you have, the more you can help them and ways they didn't even realize might be possible. Heck, someone comes to your conference room and you have your annual meeting or quarterly meeting, whatever, and then you walk them to the car. Darn good chance in that walk to the car out of the conference room, something's going to come up around personal stuff that you didn't know about them before, and now you realize, oh, I didn't realize that was a dream of yours. I didn't realize that. Let's make sure we fund that dream, right? There's nothing worse than an unfunded dream.
Paying attention.
Exactly.
Don't be thinking of your golf game you're headed to and high five the client as you get in the car. Listen to that statement that they made and go, oh, hey, next time we talk, we ought to go a little bit deeper on that. That's a really good point.
Exactly.
And maybe they were just talking off the cuff and like, oh,
right.
Yeah. They didn't even really realize the import of that.
Exactly. It's and that's what radical relevance is that radical caring and I'll tell you the three words the most valuable three words that I've ever learned in relationships, business, and personal are the words "tell me more."
Yeah.
And just understanding and appreciating and learning more.
Yep. And then shut up and listen and do the 2 ears, 1 mouth thing, right? Where you've got tell me more. Okay, use my mouth. Now let me use my 2 ears and listen, take note mentally and all that. You mentioned as we were starting talking here about borrowed trust and borrowed credibility. And I think that is essential at any point of a career. Starting off, you need to borrow it because you don't have it. In the middle and all the way through your career, you need to continue borrowing it because you need to be seen flying with the eagles, not, down in the ground with the pigeons. So I really love that mindset. And one of the sections in your book that I love too is strategies for maximizing your target market. So position yourself as a specialist, meet the influencers, speak right and start a podcast, get interviewed and get quoted. And I love that, of course, it ties into the work I do, but it reminds me of an old quote, and maybe this is one you've heard and maybe not, but there was an old, he studied media theory, Marshall McLuhan. He was a Canadian, and he wrote a book in the 60s called The Medium is the Message, and he said the way we send and receive information is more important than the information itself, meaning where your content is seen gives you as much value as the actual content. So the way I explain that to, let's say, advisors is I go, oh, you could have the solution for any retirement question, plan, whatever, put it on your website and people yawn. Oh, an FAQ, who cares? You put up on your blog post, whatever. You put it on LinkedIn, and they're like, okay, well, at least it got across my eyeballs. But if you had that into, a podcast episode where you really went deep on that, or if it was mentioned in the media, or if you had it as a chapter in a book, now all of a sudden the medium where it's being consumed is as important, if not more important, than what you're actually saying. So I really like that concept of that borrowed trust because you tie into the influencers. So what is one way that you think that an advisor could network with some influencers so that they elevate their position in the mind of their target audience so that then their message is seen as more relevant?
Well, yeah, and the typical influencers for financial professionals certainly are accountants, CPAs, attorneys, and not just estate planning attorneys, by the way. M&A attorneys, personal injury attorneys, divorce attorneys, because quite often those attorneys have that money in motion with their clients, and so that introduction is more relevant to the client than if money is not in motion. So, what's the key ingredient there in getting any influencer to appreciate and recommend you? Well, you got to be referable. You got to be remarkable, which means worthy of remark.
Yeah, that's good.
Right. So you've got to. So they got to get it, and so these influencers, they may never become a client. Now, it's great if they do become one, but they may not. So you've got to get these people to appreciate and understand your value without having actually experienced it firsthand. And so that usually takes more time than what most people are willing to put into it, into the relationship, to get to that point where you are indeed referable in their eyes. So that's one thing. The other thing with influencers, whoever they are, is talking about how to make the introduction, because while word of mouth is nice, it's nice when people talk about us, and gosh, everybody, you, me, everyone listening should get unsolicited referrals. We should get some people reaching out to us because somebody out there said something good about us. That counts, by the way. That's good. But it's not usually enough to drive us as fast and in the direction we want to go. So with accountants, with attorneys, with any influencers, we've got to talk about, here's how to recognize someone I can help. Here's how I would like to be introduced to them, right? If I recognize someone for your business, how will I know it? How would you like me to connect them with you? So those details of understanding, appreciation, and connection need to be attended to. Otherwise, you'll always be disappointed with the relationship.
You'll always be the one with your hand out, and they see you come in, whether it's on email or social or whatever, and they're like, oh, here comes old Bill. He wants another referral. And you're like, hey, if I'm the one, like our friend, Bob Burke says in Go Giver, if I'm the one giving value, even if it's just value or ideas or maybe an introduction, but if we're doing that, then they're like, oh, hey, you know what? I was thinking about something. But we can't be the old, I use this analogy so many times, the old, Jerry Lewis movies where he was the bellhop and he takes the bags up to the room and he stands with his hands out. Oh, okay, yeah, here's your tip.
Right.
Well, in business, we can't do that because people don't relate to it. So, yeah, it is that giving of your time, your empathy, your attention. And sometimes it is just that undivided attention that makes people feel valued, because so many other times out there, it's just like, pop, 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 pop. I'm too busy to talk to you, but I'll give you the answer you want. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I don't feel, listened to.
Right. Yep. No question.
Huge. Well, Bill, I think we can talk for another 3.5 hours and just scratch the surface. So let's wrap up with this.
Sure.
People are hearing and resonating with being relevant in a world of really people being confusing and having their messaging just all over the place. How can they reach out, connect with you, learn more about relationship marketing, and pick up a copy of your new book, Radical Relevance?
Well, thank you. RadicalRelevanceBook.com, number one, RadicalRelevanceBook.com. I also have a podcast now, which is TopAdvisorPodcast.com. There's another Top Advisor marketing podcast out there, and I know those folks. They're good friends of mine. But mine is TopAdvisorPodcast.com, and where I interview just a lot of top advisors for top advisors. And then ReferralCoach.com is my main website, referralcoach.com. So get into my world, send me questions, tell me what's going on for you. I'm very accessible, love to chat with folks. We'll look forward to hearing from people.
Awesome. Well, Bill, thanks so much for your time today. It was wonderful talking with you.
You bet, Mike. Great talking with you. Thank you.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.